Welcome to the Land Broker Insider Podcast, your real estate masterclass. Kasey Mock and his team are ready to dig into the proven models and systems that have propelled Mock ranches to nearly $1 billion in Texas real estate sales, and to be recognized twice as an Apex Land Broker of the Year. This is where we don't earn the right to learn. Here we learn together, so we have the right to earn. The Land Broker Insider Podcast starts right now.
Morning.
Traveling a bunch for RLI, Dan, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that might be the understatement of the century. So yeah, there's a whole. I didn't really realize jumping into this how much. I mean, when you're national, it's just a whole different envelope, and what a great opportunity it's been to meet unbelievable people. But it has taken a ton of travel.
How long has Realtors Land Institute, what we call RLI, how long has Realtors Land Institute been around? It's the land, RLI is the farm, ranch, and rural land segment of NAR, right?
Right. So, I mean, RLI originally started, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the 30s. That it was originally. It's amazing how long this has been around. The professional element of this, in the 80s grew to a pretty good point, and then it dropped off when the economy crashed in the 80s. But the real trial of this time happened, for RLI, what they call the Chicago 60. There were 60 people that gathered in Chicago to try to save RLI, writing checks out of their own pockets, trying to keep RLI as a viable entity to hold professionalism at a higher level. And so when you refer back to the original Chicago 60, that's actually quite a compliment. And right. So that group really pushed holding the professional land side, whether it be transitional ground or under all is the land, which I think is a great catchphrase for RLI. But it is true, and that group held the professional level at the highest it could possibly be done. And I think that's what's really, we'll get into why I think that's so important today in the current atmosphere that we're in politically. But it is remarkable to see that those 60 continue on with the lineage, the decades of lineage of professionalism that had been held in this industry. That about holding each other to a higher standard, about being more educated, about being more, about being actually a true advocate for land, or advocate for your buyer, or both, and having intimate knowledge of what those really mean through education and understanding why you're not a box-on-box broker if you're an RLI broker. Those things were really held together because of those 60 people.
It's interesting. I first was exposed to Realtors Land Institute, RLI, probably like in 2016, so 9 years ago. That's when I was running Keller Williams Farm and Ranch and KW Land. And RLI, I knew at that time they were a training and education source for brokers. They have the accredited land consultant ALC designation. I just knew a little bit about them, and I don't know if it's because I was intimidated, or if there was some arrogance there, or both, but I didn't see any reason to get involved. And I think a lot of brokers think that. A lot of brokers and agents think, it's just it's the do-gooders club, or it's a cliquish little club. There's no value in getting involved. Another place to pay dues, yada yada. And I was the same way early, but we had enough of our agents at KW Land that wanted to go to the land conference. And I remember that year it was in Tucson, which we're coming back to Tucson this year. This spring we'll be back in Tucson. That's right. National Land Conference, which would be so cool. But we had enough of our agents that want us to go that I flew out there. And that year, Dan Hatfield, Dan Hatfield from Bandera, San Antonio, Bandera.
Very, very well. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
So
yes,
Dan
sir.
Hatfield was national president, which is the title that you hold this year. Dan Hatfield was president, and he and I flew back together on the plane, and I sat right next to him, and I was overwhelmed. Like, I was so impressed. I'd never been around a more professional group of land brokers and agents anywhere. And I'd been in the land business at that time for, 10 or 15 years. And I'd never seen an organization anything like it as far as the level of professionalism, you know. So Hatfield and I are flying back, and I'm all in, like I want to be involved in RLI. And Hatfield says, Kasey, what's the one thing we could do to make this conference better? And it was half the size it is today, you know. And I said, Dan, I think you need to try to get 40 people there under 40 years old next year. And the next week, I got an email from somebody that said, we're putting together the Future Leaders Committee, and you're on that committee. And I was like, crap. I didn't need
yeah, you've been there ever since. I love it. Yeah. You mouthed off. Now you're part. Yeah.
I've been on an RLI committee, just helping add value to brokers around the country ever since. You were, Dan, when did you get your ALC?
Oh, I'm trying to even think back. I would say probably 8-10 years ago now. I got my accredited land consultant designation, roughly about that.
And there's how many ALCs around the country?
So, and that's probably one of the biggest things that I find the most exciting right now is that in RLI, we've got about 2,100 brokers across the West, land brokers across the United States, not the West, across the United States that are a part of this organization. And in the United States in total, there's over 3 million licensed brokers, which is just kind of hard for me to believe. But of those 3 million, about 1.5 million of those are what we like to call realtors. So they're part of the Realtor Association. They're held to a higher standard. You know, they have an ethics and moral standard that they agree to live up to as an industry affiliate. And then of that, RLI is one of the 5 professional affiliates of the National Association of Realtors. So you have the CCIM, which is a commercial. You have SIOR. You've got commercial, rental, anything to do with the professional entities in the land business. Well, RLI is truly the voice of land. So in the 1.5 million brokers that are a part of the National Association of Realtors, there's like I said, there's 2,100 of us that are RLI members. And then you've got, of that, there's only about 760 as of today, maybe 775. We're just about to bring in a new group here pretty quick that have just completed their designations. But of that, that's like 0.0002% of all of the brokers in the United States that hold this professionalism, this land. Basically, I like to call it a master's in land. And it's a pain in the butt to get. You've got to have accomplishments at every level. In order, not just education, you got to have accomplishments in sales. You have to have accomplishments in education. You've got to have accomplishments in communication with people. I mean, you don't get there for nothing. And so that designation is a
very high competency standard. Yeah.
And you're held to a much higher standard. And so, it's amazing to me to watch that the ALC designation, what it's done in my life. I mean, becoming a part of RLI, that's why I've given back so much to this organization, is that honestly, Kasey, it's given so much to my family. I can go back and attribute hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions and hundreds of thousands of acres that we have closed at M4 Ranch Group because of our affiliation with those members of RLI. And that's a real income. That's the real deal. And in that, I've built some of the better friends in my life, you being one of them. But the better friends in my life are members of this organization that I met through this organization, that I got to know through this organization. Other people that hold themselves to a standard, and hopefully I'm not being cocky saying I hold myself to that standard, but trying to be better, trying to be more educated, trying to be more efficient, trying to be, more professional in this industry, represent what you do well, represent who you do it for well, and be the right person at the closing table. That's a big deal. So
RLI to me, there's a lot of organizations you can be part of. RLI to me, I think excels in the things you just said, which is education, competency, training, standards. But the idea of collaboration and transparent business, that's ultimately, I think that's ultimately what we owe to the consumers, and I think it's ultimately what will hold our industry to a higher standard for existence into the future is collaboration and transparency of business. I mean, hell, that's been in the news for the last year, right? Is the whole idea of transparency, and RLI's been promoting that. You and I have, I mean, you and I are open books about everything. I taught a class Monday where I laid out our finances from last year. I'm like, I'm an open book.
It makes all the difference in the world. And, the industry as a whole has been under such persecution under the Biden administration that I find it hard to tolerate or not to say out loud. And I know in this industry, one of the mother rules is don't talk politics. But at some point, those that need to be held accountable need to be held accountable.
Buying or selling any type of real estate asset can be confusing. Market conditions, interest rates, zoning, surveys, title and easements, minerals, tax strategy, deal structure, and investment value. Not to mention the value of your time and responsibilities in your day-to-day business. With rural farm, ranch, and land tracts, the complexities just go up. That's why our firm, the Mock Ranches Group, invests over 200 hours per year in coaching, training, and educating our agents. So you can feel confident that when you work with Mock Ranches, you're working with a licensed and trained professional who specializes in rural Texas farm and ranch land. It's why discerning buyers and sellers have trusted Mock Ranches for nearly 10 years and over $500 million in Texas land. We have offices across the state of Texas and partners across the country through our partnership with KW Land. We're just a call or an email away for a no obligation, no bull consultation. Our phone number is 512-275-6625 or info@mockranches.com. Go get them.
So, all of us have to think about this lawsuit that happened recently and what that really did to this industry. And it's hard for me.
The Spitzer Burnett lawsuit, the Spitzer Burnett lawsuit that people have probably seen, where you get a phone call, they're like, "Hey, do I no longer have to pay commission or whatever anymore?" That one that's been in the news for the last year.
Yeah, and for sure. That's exactly what I'm referring to. And one of the things that's hard for me to understand, Kasey, number one, RLI guys, they're not to sound cocky or any of that, but you're at a different level. We don't deal with box on box brokerage. And so, and I got to back up a whole step. Last year, one of our clients called and said, "Hey, a friend of ours would like to buy a house here in Montrose." And they had bought a big ranch from us. Matter of fact, my daughter's getting married on that ranch in October. And I'm like, absolutely, we'd love to help them. And so they identified 5 places. They gave us parameters. We sent over what would fit within the region of what they were looking for. And we went and looked at 5 houses. Of those 5 houses, I never met a selling broker. Not one time. I got 5 accesses to 5 lock boxes. And I thought to myself, for us personally, we don't, number one, you don't go on one of our ranches without a representative there, period.
Yeah, correct.
And the other, it's just, you don't, because our job is to understand the property, understand the intricacies about that property. And if you're not there to portray the good, the bad, and the ugly, who is? And so your job is to present that property to the best of your ability about the facts that are on the ground, period. And so when you go to these properties and there's no brokers, there's a lockbox key, and then of course they send out these surveys and say, "Okay, what did you think of this?" Blah blah blah. And I lit into these people. I'm like, these are $1 million homes, and you don't have the time to come and show up and represent your property for your seller that you're getting paid for. And they were offended that I actually called them out, and like, no, that's what lockboxes are for. And so in that same thought process, I'm at the national meeting with the directors of NAR, and I basically, looked at the president at the time and said, it's your own fault. We're here. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you walk down to the display box down there, and your number one display is lockbox." Yeah. And I said, you've got Supra and Lockbox as the two biggest displays down there. And basically what you've done is taken a generation of agents that, number one, don't like to talk to people. They want to text. They don't want to have a conversation. They don't want to be face to face. They're not built to be face to face. They've been educated not to be face to face, and you gave them a tool in which to do it. And then you wonder, why are we getting these lawsuits? Because people don't feel they're represented for the money you're charging.
Yeah.
And I said, so that part, it really kind of hit home for me. And so I see where the frustration has come in that one experience, which is about the limit of my house selling experience. You know, it really came to me why these people are not happy. And then you turn around and look at RLI as an industry, and that's not how we do business.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can't, because we're not a box on box where the three houses on either side are exactly the same. They got three different building patterns, and they built, three houses for the whole subdivision, and they were just one after another, and they are comp sales and box on box mentality, and our world just doesn't have any boxes. And so I think
I agree with you 100% that it's the industry's fault. If the industry's under attack, it's the industry's fault. Everything else that we do, we look at it, we analyze the value that's provided, and we assign what we're willing to spend on that level of value. And frankly, the things that cost you and I the most money is service. You and I spend the most money on concierge service, good service in everything we do. You pay to valet park. You pay to go to a restaurant that has good service. You pay to go to a movie now that has people that wait on you and bring you your food. You pay for all of these services. So people are willing to pay for a concierge professional service. And you think about in our industry, not only you got to think about what you were hired to do when a seller hires you. They hired you to sell the property. They didn't hire you to put it online and send a lockbox code. They hired you to sell the property. It's no different than if you hire a surgeon. You expect the surgeon to be there. You expect the surgeon.
That's a great example. Yeah, go ahead and operate on me, but don't come.
We say we're a white collar industry like attorneys and CPAs and accountants and surgeons, yet we don't want to show up when it's time to do the work as an industry. I don't get it. We sell a bunch of stuff here that's like in that transitional zone. It's on the edge of town, 10, 20, 30 acres with a house on it. And so many of the agents, if we're representing the buyers, so many of them, it's a lockbox deal. They don't have any idea where or what the septic and the water well and the mineral situation is like, the soil type. None of it, no clue. They're not there. It's just so transactional. And I think our industry, the thing that the portals and technology and all these things can never replace is a relationship-based transaction, a professional relationship-based transaction. But if we let it become a transaction-based relationship, then we're going to make administrative wages. So when you take a listing online and you sign the documents online and you put a lockbox on it, and now they just send a photographer over there to photo it, and they don't know anything about it, nothing about it. And so don't be surprised. And hey, I'm going to caveat this because somebody's going to be mad at me and they're going to say, well, Kasey, it's leverage. I get that. But just be okay with making a little less money if that's the job. Like, you're going to make a wage in relation to the value you provide. If you are a real estate administrator, like if you're an administrative assistant to buyers and sellers of real estate, then you're going to make administrative wages. If you're a broker of properties, you're going to make broker's wages. And I tell people all the time, if it takes you 12 months to sell a property and you've got 12 months and you got 300 hours in it, that should pay a certain wage. If you can leverage a lot of stuff out and now you've got 20 hours in it in 5 or 6 days, it might pay a little less. It might pay a little less. So yeah, man, I agree with you 100% in that. Somewhere we've got, I think a lot of people in sales, not just real estate, but you and I are in this profession. A lot of real estate people They wake up every day and they believe their job is to go make calls to generate a buyer or seller. Like they think that's their job. My job is to go sell my service to a buyer and seller. Well, then once they're engaged with that buyer and seller, the level of service communication just goes down. I've done my job. I've got a buyer or seller to sign. Now I'm going to stick them in this portal system and let the portal do the work. And that's backwards. Like our job is to help buyers and sellers of real estate with what for most of them is one of the largest financial transactions they'll ever make. It's one of the number one things that will determine their lifestyle and their net worth. And they've hired us to walk them through that process. But for so many, they think the job is to go generate a buyer or seller lead that signs an agreement. And once you got them bound, then they go into this non-personalized system and portal to do the work, That's why the industry and all things that go that way end up going down in value.
100%. And we've encouraged that, as a society, we have encouraged that completely when it comes to using technology to step in and be our voice. And that is one thing that I'm so proud of RLI with. And it was an ironic meeting, not an ironic, it was a kind of an eye-opening meeting. I was at one of the national meetings, and so it's the RLI board of directors sitting down with our president, vice president, president-elect, all that stuff, sitting down, executive director, sitting down with National Association of Realtors, their lobbyists, sitting down with their board of directors, president, vice president, president-elect, all those things, and having a heart-to-heart about where the industry is going and understanding where we're doing and what we're doing. And one of those executives came to me and said, RLI may be the saving grace for the real estate industry. And I'm like, well, that's really, I'm really glad to hear that. I'm very invested into this, but it's nice to hear, but I want to know where that comes from. And he said, well, to be honest with you, RLI encourages accountability. It encourages education. It encourages, being that voice of land that is knowledgeable. And if you're not knowledgeable, you're the source of the source. It takes, if you don't know the answer, you find out who to ask. And he said that's the one thing that RLI has put on the table that really holds the rest of the industry to a higher standard. And I thought to myself, I don't know if those guys in the 1920s and 30s that set apart with this, I know they had an idea in mind, but here we are in 2024 or 25, excuse me, we're in 2025 and we're having this conversation about that exact thing. And you think back and think, okay, these guys really started during the Depression, pushing so hard as to protecting, the integrity of the industry, being accountable, being licensed. That was when it all started. And now we're in a position where that challenge is here, and we're trying to figure out ways to hold the industry to a higher standard. And we may literally have stumbled into the way that the part that's doing it. I know we live by that. You do it, and I do too. And it doesn't mean all of us don't make mistakes, Kasey. You know as well as I do. Everybody in this industry and everybody in every industry screws up. What I do think it does is it holds people accountable to how do they deal with those screw ups. And so it's definitely it's been a pleasure to be a part of that atmosphere at that kind of professional level and see people put that integrity, that drive, that want to be better, to do more, to earn your keep kind of thing. I do think that the land industry's really done it. And I think it's generated real wealth when it comes to sellers and buyers. We have generated real opportunity for whether it be a fifth generation rancher about selling a property or somebody selling an 80-acre farm as transitional grounds outside of Fort Worth. That transitional ground's way different than it was when they bought it by the acre and they're selling it by the foot. Well, a lot of these guys are dirt rich and cash poor. And so knowing how to deal with things like 1031s, understanding Delaware trust, understanding an opportunity for a 180 tax deduction, having the ability to step in and go, what about? Have you looked at? Have you investigated? Does this work for you? How do we maintain that generational wealth for your family that you've held on to for so long? and it is an honor to be a part of some of those conversations.
Dan, what do you see legislatively coming this year as you're in those circles? Legislatively, what are you seeing that's going to affect real estate brokerage?
I mean, I got to be perfectly honest. I'm extremely excited about the Trump transition coming in right now. Once again, I know we're not supposed to talk politics, but I'm incredibly excited about that because I do
my show and you're my guest, so we can talk about whatever we want to talk about.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
Yeah, Trump should be very. He's very pro real estate, obviously. Yeah.
Well, he's really pro accountability.
Yeah.
In all honesty, he really is, and his cabinet's the same way. The people that he has put in place, they're just not. They're not buying into the fluff idea of all this stuff. They're buying into what's real. And, we face so many regulations in this industry when it comes to, some of the court cases that we recently won in the United States take away the authority for these independent agencies to write the laws as they see fit or to interpret them as they see fit. And we're in a position right now where, you work with things like Waters of the United States. You work with the Endangered Species Act. You worked with these entities where these people are very educated. They may have a master's degree out of Maryland, and now they're in charge of grazing in the Western United States. They've never been to the Western United States. And so that kind of thing, we have promoted stupidity at the highest level you can possibly predict when it comes to accountability. And as soon as somebody gets comfortable or gets solid in these jobs, we transfer them somewhere else. And so it's amazing for me to work in these arenas, when it comes to dealing with water, when it comes to dealing with transitional grounds, when it comes to development, when it comes to, energy. I mean, we've had some really foolish things happen in the United States. And I do think that there's a transition coming into place that's gonna make basically look, help us. If it works, it's gonna work. If it doesn't work, we're not gonna keep doing it. And that's, if it pays, it stays. And Kasey, you're from the same background I am. I'm from a wildlife background, and everything from working with the Rhino Rescue Organization in Africa to being a professional outfitter in 4 Western states for 20 years of my life, sleeping 100 nights a year in a sleeping bag for those 20 years, and basically working in Africa and having a chance to be a part of that. Basically we had to convince the locals that if it pays, it stays. And so if we can encourage tourism, if we could encourage an opportunity to make people realize that those rhinos had more value alive than they did dead, we had an opportunity to protect them. And so I'm a hunter. I'm from the hunting world. I live by that, but I'm also a hunter in the excess, not a hunter in what's not there. And so that mentality about protect what we have, build the right herd class, age composition, sex ratios, having things that are accountable, and then you hunt the benefit that's on the outside of that, not punishing the herd so that you can sell more beer. It's definitely one of those things that I think that same mentality about if it pays, it stays is coming into the real estate industry as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. What's your forecast for 2025, Dan?
Extremely positive. I mean, right now we're in the middle of January. We have had snowcats running. We got rangers on tracks. We've been in the airplanes. We've been as busy as I can ever remember being in this industry. We had the best year of our career last year, and it was because people were hiding money, not knowing what was coming in the election. This year, we're starting out looking like an unbelievably good year because we've got a position where people are excited about spending money. It's, honestly, we're kind of in a pretty good position as being, land brokers and doing what we're doing, whether you're buying to hide or you're buying to protect or you're buying to grow. We're kind of on both sides of that. And so it's a very unique thing to be part of that industry. But I'm expecting a very positive 2 to 3 years coming up here. So
isn't it funny what motivates people? Consumer is different than investors, different than the extreme wealthy or the under-resourced. What motivates people so interesting. And real estate, it's a great tool for all of them. Last year, like you said, there was a lot of people wanting to hide money, very little debt utilized that we saw, a lot of people trying to hide money, but a lot of the equities markets were really tough, for somebody to go and do a tax play, let's say, if they're going to do multifamily or commercial or industrial, man, a lot of the equities markets for that stuff was pretty tough. It was really tough. We saw a fraction of the 1031 exchanges last year that we typically see. And typically for us anyway, 60% of our deals have an exchange on them, which shows you the value of the exchange to the economy. Because it's not tax exempt, it's just tax deferred, right? So
Right.
usually
You're not
60%
saving anything. You're just moving it.
have an exchange on one side or the other, and then you'll be, 20% cash, 20% finance, and the exchanges usually have a cash component to them. But last year was very different. Last year we probably only had 25% of our deals had an exchange, which told me that people are having to come up with the money. They're having to come up with the money. They weren't aggressively borrowing yet. They were having to come up with the money to buy stuff because they weren't selling something to replace it with. But we ended up having a really good year, 25% up from the year before. I hope 25 continues that trend because we're still 20% off of where we'd like to be, but finished good. You think 25? What do you think will be what do you think, Dan, are going to be the primary things that make people do business in 25? I think it's just confidence in the market, or what?
Yeah, I think people are. I mean, right now, I do think that there's some real apprehension thinking about how do we solve all the current problems we have around the world. Our immigration problem coming in from Mexico, the world markets. Looking at the Ukraine situation right now, the Middle East. We have a lot of moving parts that are extremely violent happening right now, unfortunately, with this past administration that just continue to grow, seem like daily. And I've got friends and family on both sides of the Israeli thing. I honestly do. I've got Palestinian friends and Israeli kids that are parts of our family. And they're in both sides have been in that mess going on over there. And that's just been heartbreaking. And so I do think we're going to see some resolution, hopefully sooner rather than later on those, and get the world back to a place of accountability a little bit more than we've seen. I think that'll help us a little bit on the world market. I think that most of our investors are like anything else, that they're bigger picture. They pay attention to the stock market is a big thing for us, but protecting 1031 is huge. I know it's not the same for us as it is for you guys. You guys deal with a little bit more on the industrial side, or people transferring into closer transitional ground. Or for us, we see it as wildlife habitat protection. With we got 80% of our wildlife in the West, lives on private ground in the winter. And if we don't protect those pieces, and these are rich, dirt rich people that are cash poor, that own these assets, and without 1031, those things become developments. And trying to explain to people this isn't just a rich man's game. That this is for us out west. This is a wildlife protection corridor. And I got a chance to testify during COVID. I got a chance to testify to a bunch of senators on that exact issue. And I'm explaining to them about 80% of the wildlife living on private land in the winter months, and the lights came on. You could see people in that audience, the senators step up and go, holy, I never realized that. And it wasn't all of a sudden just a high rise being traded for another high rise. It actually, people kind of understood the other side of that transaction. It wasn't just a rich man's game. It's not, it's got bigger impacts. And I think that we're coming in back to your question.
Wrong with high-rise being traded for another high-rise, man. Every time a piece of commercial real estate trades, contractors get hired, furniture gets purchased. I mean, that it stimulates the economy when a piece of real estate gets traded. Think of all of the trades that get hired every time there's real estate purchase. We just bought a new office here in Stephenville. Just spent just shy of $500,000 on the building. Great location. It was move-in ready, dude. Like this place had recently been remodeled, spotless. You could have eaten off the floor, not a hole in the drywall on the wall, like move-in ready. But my wife didn't like it. So 2 days after closing, we got a contractor in there that guts the entire thing. So they're coming back. Oh yeah, man. Guts the entire thing. They're coming in and putting rock walls inside and new fixtures, and just we're going to spend another $150,000 on the building, all with local contractors, and we'll spend another $50,000 on furniture and fixtures at the local stores. And that's what people that are not in favor of the exchange, that's what they don't get. They don't get that at some point I'm still going to have this capital gain tax, but in the meantime, I'm paying all these contractors, spending all this sales tax and stimulating the economy that way. Whereas if that didn't happen, you wouldn't get the capital gain tax at some point and you wouldn't get the sales tax today, you know.
We're in exactly the same boat. Michelle and I bought 74 acres in the city limits of Montrose, and our office is for sale in one community, and we're building in another. And, you know, I met with the contractors this morning with a little bit of come to Jesus meetings this morning, and it's definitely a pretty fun deal. But that being said, you know, that's the kind of thing that let's go to the big picture on ROI. ROI has an opportunity like no other. When, you know, protecting 1031, we won 2 Supreme Court cases this year. The reason that ROI has a voice at that level is because when National Association of Realtors with 1.5 million members, they have a lot deeper pockets than we do. They come to us and say, okay, what about this legislation? How does this affect you? Or we bring them legislation, and we won 2 of the Supreme Court cases this year. ROI was the amicus. We wrote in the amicus brief into those issues. That's the single biggest positive that ROI has, and as far as a voice goes on a national front, other than the relationships and the opportunities that we have to literally generate wealth together, to generate deals together, to build friendships. The biggest positives we have in ROI is our ability to affect the national law on how we protect private landowner rights. And we have been huge in that. And we have, and so that gift basically comes to us through our affiliation with the National Association of Realtors. Have they screwed up a lot of things? Oh my God. Yes, they have. In all honesty, yes, they have. Are they having an awakening? They truly are having an awakening right now. Do they have good leadership right now? Honestly, I think they've got better leadership right now than they've had in the last 20 years. And nothing against the guys that led before, but the mentality was different. It was all built around foo-foo or some independent group. Instead of defending the industry and defending brokers as a whole, we were so busy dividing ourselves into being one race of brokers or one sex of broker or whatever it was. Instead of being brokers held to a professional level, we're so busy concentrating on Korean brokers or whatever it was. And
they established all these communities. The brokers did the same thing. Like the big franchise brokers did the same thing.
Yeah.
The whole industry did it. They started building all these different communities. You've got the young professionals, old professionals. You've got all the different ethnicities, communities. Right. You've got farm, ranch, commercial. Then you've got, you know, it's almost like they're at the basket weavers community. It's just all about these different communities, which what they're trying to do is, you know, it's all about the inclusion, right? You got to include everybody. But what you do there is you silo and you fragment everybody is what ends up happening. That's all you get through that woke crap. All you get through any of that woke legislation, woke policy, woke approach is fragmentation and segregation. And it's all in the name of trying to not be segregated. And all you do is further segregate people and silo everybody. Instead of getting everybody together, it just silos them.
Well, and Kasey, I had this exact conversation with the board, the National Realtors Board, president, vice president, their executive director, and said, you know, I'm really proud of you guys right now. You're finally stepping away from that stuff. And then in the very next magazine, they did it again. And it just, you know, it blows me away how they're so slow to pick up on stop dividing us. Hold the profession to a higher level, period. No matter where you are, who you sleep with, what race you're from, it makes no difference. Be a good broker. That's what you're an association to protect. And that's the one thing that I think ROI does the best with. We are pretty diversified as a group, but I tell you what, everybody in that group, they're friggin' professionals and they're stepping up. And if they're not, they're trying to be better by coming. And, you know, that's what I'm the most proud of, you know, and I had a young broker call me a couple nights ago, and he's not with the best. That young broker is not in a very good brokerage. They're known for really not doing the right thing, you know, and his whole goal, he's a cut above, and his whole goal was to step up and be better, you know, and he called and said, look, how do I change this? And I'm like, you know, start spending some time with people that you're holding yourself to a higher accountability. Your brokerage is not, but I've done deals with you. I've seen how you do business. I invited you to RLI on purpose because you have a better backbone. You have a higher moral standard. Let's see what you can do with it when you surround yourself with people that are doing the same thing. And he just signed up for national. He's coming for the first time, and he's one of those guys under 40 that we talked about, 40 under 40. And right now we have a lot of young people coming into this industry and looking for that guidance because of that, because I think we have separated ourselves out when it comes to not dividing. We have separated ourselves out about being a better professional while not dividing the entities that are doing it.
Well, it comes down to we're broker agent member run, not executive run. It's not run by a bunch of bureaucrats and executives. It's run by the top professional brokers, agents, members choosing to be involved for the sake of the better of everybody in the industry, buyers and sellers included in that. Like people that genuinely understand the job that we signed up to do, the professionalism and the weight that it carries. They understand what the word fiduciary means, and they know that this industry and all the people involved, the brokers, agents, buyers, sellers, everybody involved, they deserve and they will command the highest level of service and professionalism in order for us to exist and be able to continue to help people accomplish their goals through real estate. And that's, I think, when you become too bureaucratic and executive run as opposed to agent and member run, you go down the wrong path. Dan, I appreciate you so much. Give us real quick a couple of coming events with RLI, and then tell me what's going on fun at M4.
So on the 16th and 17th, Colorado RLI is one of the bigger meetings in the West. We'll probably have 120 RLI brokers at that meeting, which is just really exciting. Great opportunity to meet and greet and get a chance to start the year off on a new way, or not a new way, just on a strong way. And then the national conference, we're going to have roughly 500 members there this year, which is really exciting, maybe a little north of 500. It's probably one of the best professional events that I've ever been to. It's so worth the money, unfortunately you got to protect your liver, but other than that, it's one of the funnest things. And you'll get surrounded by people that are trying to be better, really working hard to represent the industry at the highest levels. And I guarantee you that's time and money well spent. I can't tell any young broker that I know of who's serious about this industry that's not something you want to do. That's a good investment to make, period. And then
that's
as far
during during the RLI meeting overlaps the National Western Stock Show. It's in Denver.
Yep.
Right.
So
and
it's
that's
at the finals.
2 days before it's the 2 days before isn't the 3R Roundup Riders deal on the 18th? Is that right?
25th. So we've got the 3R Riders 25th. Dinner is on the 25th, and then 16th and 17th is the RLI convention. So you have the 16th is the meeting where we exchange, we go through properties and do the RLI business. That's really a great place to present properties of your sellers. You will do deals out of that. And then the next day is education. And so you get continuous CE then, and then the National Western Stock Show is going on that time. So you get a chance to go to the rodeo as well, which is a lot of fun. And then the National is in Tucson this year. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think it's March, if I'm not mistaken. That's a trip well worth taking. Look into that if you're interested in coming. It's well worth the money and time.
I think it's the first weekend in April.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's like Yeah. We've already registered for that. It falls over our spring break, so we get to bring the kids.
Oh, that'll be
Hopefully
fun.
I get my ALC there. Hopefully I can complete my ALC.
I think I get a chance to present your award. So it is going to be fun coming in as president. It's a 4-year commitment being president, so it's been a long run. But I'm excited about being there for this. We're going to have a phenomenal national conference this year. And then M4 is, we've been extremely blessed.
As if you needed something else to do, because everything we've talked to for the last 46 minutes is volunteer work.
Yeah.
What do you do 100%. For a living, man?
So
what do you do for a living?
I think we're going to be top in the West again this year. I'm real excited about that. I'm hoping that's the case in total sales. And so we're really fortunate to be able to play in that higher level like that and have success like that. And when we ended up with a hell of a year last year. And so that's been a blessing. And M4 is continuing to do great things. We're growing and working through learning and being better every day. It's a challenge. So we're just really fortunate to have an opportunity to represent amazing properties and get a chance to get to know phenomenal buyers and sellers. So we're just unbelievably blessed. So it has been, I honestly, somebody asked me this morning, I was grabbing breakfast and the guy said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, we sell ranches throughout the Mountain West. And come to find out, he goes, oh, well, my uncle is Werner Trucking. And, it was a long story, but we helped their family get a bighorn sheep this year. And he goes, yeah, that was my cousin, and it was, it's ironic. You sit at a drive-in and somebody's reaching down. His uncle is one of the largest truckers in world history, and you're sitting there talking about getting his cousin a sheep on a bighorn sheep hunt. And, it's just, you never know who you're talking to. So you want to treat everybody with the same respect. It's kind of a neat deal.
Dan Murphy, M4 Ranch Group. Y'all do probably the most professional job in our industry that I've ever experienced. It's an honor to call you a friend. It's an honor to serve with you, work with you, share deals together. And, man, I appreciate you coming on, everything you do.
It's my honor, buddy. I love you and love your family and look forward to spending as much time as we possibly can together.